Welcome to the Transform My Dance Studio podcast, the only podcast for dance studio owners, where each week we bring you business growth strategies to help you increase your profits, impact the lives of more students, while ensuring you give back some time to have a little life outside of the studio. It's time for you to become the go-to studio in your area. Now, here's your host, founder of the Dance Studio Owners Association, Clint Salter.
Hi there, dance studio owners. It's Clint Salter here. Welcome to this week's special episode of the Transform My Dance Studio podcast. Today is our last episode, sad face, last episode of our best of month. Over the last 4 weeks now, we've been sharing with you the best bits of our podcast from the last 2 and a bit years. We started with our student attraction special where we had 5 amazing guests, Samantha Riley, Paul Holland, Marco Panzig, Ray Edwards, and Kate Toon, teaching you how to grow your dance studio, how to really build those student numbers inside of your business. We then had our social media special week where we heard from some amazing gurus in the social media space, teaching you how to master Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, and all those other things that just keep changing. And then we had our mindset special last week where we talked to Carolyn Webb, Melissa Klassen, Marissa Pierre, and Holly Dowling all around being a strong, resilient, persistent leader and really stepping it up when it comes to, being the CEO of your studio. And today we've got a popular topic that we're talking about, all about productivity. Now, hands up if you feel like you could be more productive with your day. Now, I can't see you, but I know that most studio owners would love to be more efficient, effective, and productive with the work that they do during their working hours. And so what we've done is we've collated 4 amazing guests that we had on our podcast, took out the best bits and roll it into one for you. We've got Paul Henderson, David Allen, Dave Crenshaw, and Todd Herman, all teaching you how to become more productive with your day inside your studio. And last reminder, make sure if you haven't already, jump on over to our website, dancestudioownersassociation.com, and grab the free guide that I've written, 7 ways to attract students in 7 days. If filling your classes is a priority for you for the rest of the year and going into the new year, the new season, I want to make sure you get a copy of that free guide. So enjoy today's episode. It's a productivity marathon. Enjoy. I think, the mistake a lot of studio owners make is they go, wow, this will be really great. We can sell everything ourselves. And they actually don't crunch those numbers before they make the commitment.
Exactly. And really the biggest number is the inventory number. That's the number that people forget about is like, oh, yeah, I can make, every time I sell a pair of shoes, I'm going to make $10. Well, yeah, but you have to tie that up in inventory. And then once you sell it, you got to replace it. So it's just always stuck in inventory. And you can sort of think of like when you go into a dancewear store in a studio, and you look at the shelves of the boxes and boxes of dusty boxes of shoes, and you go, that's just money sitting on that shelf that you can't use for anything else. It's just stuck there. And you can only sell it in September or April or May.
Exactly.
That's it. And then it's just going to sit there again. And then, there is a way to do it where you can make money if you're doing it yourself and you're really, really smart about it. But I think there's more you can do with that square footage in your studio to make a higher profit per square foot than dancewear.
And so what would those things be?
It depends. If you've got a big enough studio and you've got like a lobby or something, you can either make that more comfortable for the parents, which is going to make them talk about your studio more to their friends, which is sort of like a marketing boost. Or you can make the actual dance room bigger and fit more dancers into the classroom. Like a lot of Tiffany's classes in the last couple of years, her ballet classes and jazz classes have lots of kids in them, 20, 25 kids. And that's okay, in my opinion, if they're the type of dancers that can learn in that environment. I wouldn't recommend that for the little babies, but for performing company kids or advanced dancers who know how to take a class, that's okay, in my opinion. And I think Tiffany would agree that certain, like hip hop, for example, there's, hip hop is something that doesn't move across the floor as much as a ballet class or whatever. And so there's classes of ours have 25 or 30 kids in them. And so the idea of like when you're looking at what can you do per square foot, well, the highest thing that you can do is sell dance classes, tuition. That's kind of what we did. Our lobbies are very, very small. Our dance rooms are very, very big. We want the dancers to be comfortable in there and be able to, for certain classes, be able to put a lot of dancers in there.
Yeah, sure. Makes complete sense to me. Now let's talk about you and Tiffany for a minute, because I think you probably, and you can tell me different, but I think you probably make a pretty perfect team when it comes to, running the studio and the preschool program as well, Twinkle Star Dance, because I guess you're focusing on automating the day-to-day running of the business while Tiffany gets to do what she loves, which is obviously, work on the program, with her teachers and doing some teaching. I mean, what are some of the biggest lessons you've learned during your years of automating more of the business?
Oh, there's a lot. I could go on for days on that alone. But Tiffany and I are very lucky in that she really knows what she's talking about when it comes to teaching dance. I mean, she's a really good teacher, and she knows she's a good teacher. And I think that's very important, is that when the studio owner knows what she's talking about and is confident in that, then you realize that the first biggest lesson is that the customers, your dance customers, will do what you tell them to do. And I think we bump up against a lot of pushback from studio owners who, when you say, hey, why don't you implement this program, or why don't you try it this way, or why don't you have a dress code, or whatever it might be, their first response sometimes is, well, my customers would never go for that. And, or my instructors would never go for that. And so the first biggest lesson is that, look, if you're confident in your business and you know what you're doing, then your customers are going to follow you. You're going to attract people that like you and like your program because they believe in you. And the same thing with the instructors. So I think that's probably the biggest lesson, is just figure out who you are and what you want, and then attract people that are on the same page as you to begin with.
I couldn't agree more. We always talk about finding your ideal student and parent. So many people have their studio and they say, well, we have classes for everyone and everyone can come to us and we'll take everyone. And I'm like, that's the biggest mistake you can make in your business, because you don't want to be everything to everyone, because you end up getting the parents and the students and attracting teachers that aren't right for the business and the life that you want to have. So I think what you're kind of touching on there is a lot of it, and I had a very similar conversation with, 70 studio owners that came to a live event a weekend ago. And I was kind of saying, stop saying no to everything before you've actually kind of, put some steps into action. Like, people were saying, I couldn't put my price up to that, or they won't buy that, or they wouldn't go to a recital or concert if it was there, having all these kind of preconceptions around what their clients would do. And I turned around and said, but do you own the studio or do they? And I think that's an interesting kind of idea right there. Like, you are the business owner.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll add to that a little bit, is that in the early days when Tiffany, when she first opened the studio in the year 2000, she would literally come home every day crying about some problem that she had with some parent. And it's very emotional, because when you open a dance studio and you're young and naive about the reality of the world, is that there are people out there that are just haters. They just are. They exist, and you got to deal with them. And I would tell her, once a week at least, maybe twice a week, okay, so one person complained today. How many people did not complain today? 300? Okay. So that is less than 1/3 of 1% of people who complained or don't like you. That's a pretty good number. And so my other biggest lesson I learned is, look, don't worry about the 2 to 4% of people that complain about whatever policy you want to implement. Just let them go. Get rid of them. They don't matter. They're the ones that don't want to follow you on your journey. And that's okay. There's no way around it. And then try to focus on the 95 or 98% of people that are with you. They're paying tuition. They're coming to class. They like it. They love you. They tell their friends about you, So try to focus on the positive.
Yeah, and put your time and energy into them. And so how do we start getting things out of our head? And I guess knowing what we need to get out of our head and put it onto paper or into a system to then get ourselves, moving through the day and achieving what we need to do to reach our goals.
Right. Well, there's actually 4 critical steps to feel comfortable about what you're doing, and maybe most importantly, how comfortable you are about what you're not doing. And the first step is to capture the stuff that has your attention. The second step is to then make decisions specifically about what those things are, what you're committed to complete about them, and what the next step on those are. Step 3 is to organize the results of that thinking and that decision making into a trusted system. And then step 4 is making sure that you use that, what is now called an external brain, that thing that's keeping track of all of these commitments and the would, could, should, need tos and ought tos and projects and things I need to do, keeping that reviewed and current regularly so that your mind gets to relax about having to remember and remind. And then you start to use your intelligence to just make good intuitive choices about what to do and what not to do out of the whole mix of the inventory. But most people aren't even close to having that inventory anywhere captured or enumerated.
Yeah, and I think that's the first big thing is capturing it. I know for our studio owners, something that I say all the time is, stop holding everything inside of your head. It's like they're the only people that know anything that's going on inside of their business, and everyone else is kind of just like flying around a little bit blind. I don't know what I should be doing. I don't have a system for doing that process because it's all inside the studio owner's head. So in that first stage of capture, what's the best way for us to do that?
Pen and paper.
Yep.
Right. No Wi-Fi required, no batteries required. And basically what you want to do, there's a big distinction between the capture function and the organize function. And most people confuse those. They just sit down to make a to-do list. And a to-do list for most people is just a very bare beginning of the capture step that you need to do. The capture step really means you need to write down, get out of your head every single thing potentially that you might need to decide or do something about. Everything from little stuff like I need cat food to the big stuff like I need to hire an assistant or I need to think about buying a company, all the way to, and all the personal stuff, all the professional stuff, any of that stuff. And by the way, for most people, that would take 1 to 6 hours just to collect and capture, not to decide what to do about it, not to organize it, not to prioritize it, just to identify those things pulling on the psyche. So you don't need to go very far to know what it is you need to capture. Hey, what's on your mind? As a matter of fact, most of the people probably listening to this already have had something pop into their head, even the few minutes we've been talking, that has nothing to do with what we've been talking about. That's the stuff they should carry, if they're in the dance studio or anywhere, you need to make sure you've got tools for capturing stuff as it pops into your head. Initially, you need to do a big sort of a data dump and get it all out of your head to begin with. But then from then on, you need to keep that stuff out of your head, which means keep pen and paper, keep a little notepad with you wherever you go, because the older you get, the more you're going to have good ideas, not where that idea is going to be implemented. Mm-hmm. So you need to be able to capture stuff wherever you are. But then you can't leave it there. The capture step, usually if I look at most people's to-do list, you see things like mom or bank, or dog or assistant or, bread, who knows. And those things, that's fine. That was a good capture step. But why did you write mom down? It's historical data. I'm sure you had one at some point. But you wrote it down because of why? Oh, well, her birthday's coming. Well, what are you going to do about her birthday? I don't know what I'm going to do about her birthday. Yeah, that's the problem. Now you've captured, but you haven't clarified. You've got something, you've got your attention, something has your attention, you've identified it. But then you need to move to the clarify step pretty soon, which means basically you need to ask yourself, look, what's the very next step I need to do about mom's birthday? And then if one step won't finish whatever that thing is, then you need to keep track of the project that you're now committed to. So you might say, well, I guess I need to call my sister and see what she thinks about whether we should give mom a birthday party or not. Cool. Now you have an action step. Call sis at Ray mom's birthday. But you didn't write that down. You didn't even recognize or realize that was the next step until you stopped and asked yourself that question. So clarifying the next action on things that have your attention is something that does not happen automatically. We're not born doing it. You actually have to train yourself to make that decision and to think down at that level of granularity about your stuff. And the fact that most people haven't actually made that decision, the next action decision, about most of the things that have their attention, means that they're not yet appropriately engaged with that commitment. Because if it's something you're committed to move on or do, but you haven't defined what doing looks like and where that happens, then there's a part of you that says, well, what are you going to do about Mom's birthday? What are you going to do about Mom's birthday? And now you let loose this monkey inside your head that'll wake you up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Say, oh, God, I got to do something about Mom's birthday. What is that? And so as simple and silly as that sounds, that's bad enough for just one thing you haven't made that decision about. Make it 200, because that's usually how many next actions most people have with the current things going on in their life and their work. And you really start to create that sense of overwhelm, or that sense of, God, there's just much more to do than I know how to do, or that I have time to do. But most people haven't actually defined what doing is.
Yeah, makes complete sense. I mean, David, what part of the process then are we going through and prioritizing? Because if someone's doing and I call it a brain dump, I'm a big fan of your methodology, but if you brain dump like everything down, you capture everything that's inside your head, and then for all of that work out an action step, I mean, that's quite then overwhelming to see that. When do we start saying, you know what, I don't actually have to do anything there, or I can delegate that, or I need to do that? Where does that come into the picture?
Well, that comes in as soon as you're conscious of what's on these lists. See, you're making priority decisions all day long, Clint. Me too. About 50,000, because that's about how many thoughts they estimated you have. So you have a choice about what to think about at any point in time. So how many priorities do you have? Well, how many different things do you do today? Right? I eat lunch. Well, that was a priority, right? So most people have kind of oversimplified the whole idea of prioritizing. It's really a rather complex, intuitive event to make a judgment call about, okay, which thing, if I do it right now, would make the biggest difference to me? And that's a pretty simple way to answer it. I have a pretty simple way that I determine mine, because I love having a clear head and not much. I don't like the feeling of there's anxiety in my head. So my priority is, well, what thing most has my attention right now? What would make the biggest difference in my head if this thing were completed or done? And that could look like a lot of different things. That could be a different thing at 8 o'clock in the morning than it is at 6 o'clock at night, because those are different times. I'm in different places. I have different energy. I have different time frames. I'm in different contexts. So constantly keeping the inventory out in front of you. And then, the big key, for step 4, which is the review process, at least once a week, your dance studio folks need to make sure that they do what I've identified as the weekly review. Once a week, boy, you need to step back, close the door, get off social media, don't answer the phone, and take 2 hours and catch up. All the stuff that's occurred, the new things that have happened, things that you haven't finished yet, and get and review your system. Review the last 2 weeks in your calendar, review the next couple of months in your calendar to catch all the, oh God, that reminds me, I need tos. All that stuff. That won't happen by itself. We're usually too busy during the day, day to day, minute to minute, to stop and do that kind of review. You actually have to build that in. And again, that doesn't happen automatically. That is a best practice and a habit that you have to develop. So reflection time, especially for somebody, trying to run a small business or medium-sized business and wearing, 15 different hats that they have to wear, and then managing a home life in addition to all of that, that's absolutely critical. That you've got to keep that stuff reviewed, keep it out of your head, and just keep that, essentially what I call them the orientation maps. What map do you need? What do you need to look at before you start your day? What do you need to look at before you go home with your family? What things do you need to remind yourself about, essentially? If anybody keeps a calendar, and I'm sure most of your folks do, if they keep a calendar, you're already saying your head can't do it, that you need some external form to be able to be reminded of where you need to be and locate yourself in space and time. So that's what you do when you look at your calendar. That's what I do the night before. My next day is I check to see, what are the hard landscape things, the things I have to do tomorrow, both in terms of appointments and commitments and things that have got to be done sometime that day. And I check that out before I go to sleep, because I like to sleep as long as I can. I'm a big fan of sleep. So, that's the first thing I do is the night before. Or absolutely first thing in the morning, I just want to know, what time do I need to get up? When do I have to do something? And then try to leave myself as free as I can and as spontaneous as I can for the rest of the time. But all the other options are on all the other lists that I have of all the actions that I need to take as soon as I have time.
Now, a lot of our studio owners, Dave, have their to-do lists. And so what I'd love to get is your opinion on to-do lists and how do we really go about, brain dumping what needs to be done and then prioritizing those things. And also, a lot of our studio owners think they can get a lot more done in one day than they can. So how do we manage that as well?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is to-do list is it's a loaded word for me. It's something where the moment I hear it, my ears perk up because I am a very big proponent of not using to-do lists. I think that they are part of the problem. And the solution is very simple. It's something that all of us have or can have access to, but few are using correctly, and that's the calendar. The calendar is so important because it is the budget. It shows how much time we actually have available in the day. Let's contrast that with what a to-do list is. A to-do list is a running list of things that need to be done, and we might do it. We might get to it at some point, but if we don't, then it's just going to roll over. And because we're not allocating time to that, it really creates a lot of problems in our day. So I'm a strong proponent of using the calendar instead, and instead processing the things that you need to do. Now, processing is something that I talk about in my time management course. I don't know, Clint, is it okay if I share a link where people can get free access to that for 30 days?
Yeah, of course, that'd be great. We'll put that link as well in the show notes for you.
Okay, great. So the link is davecrenshaw.com, and Crenshaw is spelled with a C, davecrenshaw.com/free time. And what that is a link to where you can get 30 days free access to lynda.com. Lynda.com is what I call the Netflix of training, thousands of courses. One of mine is Time Management Fundamentals. It's one of the most popular. It's had millions of views. In Time Management Fundamentals, I teach the basics of how to do better with processing. And so that's a great starting point for every business owner. The business is the entrepreneur's mirror. If you are disorganized, the business will be disorganized. And on the positive side, if you get together and get focused, then your business is going to be like that.
Yeah.
So I recommend that as a great starting point. I can, though, talk about the prioritization question as well, if you'd like me to
Yeah,
address
please. I would love you to jump into that because I know a lot of people struggle with, well, I've got this and I've got that, and what should I do first? So,
well, we were all, I don't know all, but most of us have grown up with the concept that Covey made popular of the urgent and important matrix, right? The 4 quadrants. I grew up almost right next to where Covey is. He was an idol of mine. I used that myself as well. Here's the problem. In the 21st century, it's almost useless. And the reason why is because everything is urgent in our world now. Is it not?
Mm-hmm. Everything.
Yeah. And almost everything is important. So how do we distinguish between the two? My suggestion is we're looking at it from the wrong perspective. Rather than trying to do work, use our time in the best way, we want to instead choose activities that will give us more time that we can use to whatever we want in the future. I call this earning time dividends. So you're making investments that pay back lots and lots of time. And some people have an abundance of time, and it's usually because they use this kind of prioritization. So there are really 5 steps. I'm going to sum it up in 3. The first step is to ask yourself, is there something repetitive that I'm doing that I can delegate to someone else? Now, my guess is if you got a dance studio, you got people working for you, and you probably have not delegated properly or enough. My guess is there are a lot of things that you're doing that because it's repetitive, you could create a system and you could train someone else to do it, but entrepreneurs get get into that habit of thinking, well, no one can do it as well as I can. By the time I teach it to someone else, I will have done it myself. And so they just do it.
That's the one. That's the one.
Yep. But that's not our goal. Our goal is to get time dividends. We want getting time back into our bank account over and over and over again in the future. That means taking a moment and making investment in it. So that's number one. Number two is, am I holding up the work of others? Never be the bottleneck. What this means is that if you are causing your employees or a team of your employees or whoever it is that you're working with to not work, they're sitting around and idle because of you, that's a red flag. We need to make sure that you are the fastest point in any system. It just flies right through you and moves on to other people. Otherwise, we're wasting everybody's time.
Now, do you think that happens, Dave, sometimes because as studio owners, we don't want to give over too much control on a certain project or particular task?
Yes. Well, and it's not just control; it's the illusion of perfection. I'm afraid that they're just not quite going to do it right. But the reality is, not perfect is good enough, as long as it's consistent. And we need to take more time to train other people on how to do things so that we can feel comfortable letting go of that control.
Yeah, completely agree with you. I love that. Number two. It's a great one.
And then number three is, can I create something that will work for me while I'm sleeping? So if the first one that I gave you was the people side of it, the third step is the inanimate object side of it, or the marketing side of it that's online. Do you have videos online that are selling for you? Do you have a blog? Do you have a marketing program that's automatic, that's rolling? You want things that are working for you while you're sleeping, and that will not only bring you more money to your business, but it's going to give you a lot more disposable time because you're not going to have to go out there and sell hand to hand to every person.
Exactly. It's great. It's that real leverage piece, and we teach about, putting those automated systems in place, not only around retracting the marketing side of things, but also for onboarding new students and retention. It's really great as well. So I think they're three fantastic tips, and I think our studio owners are going to be nodding their heads, going, "I need to get this under control." Because what happens, Dave? I mean, you've worked with so many, studio owners and business owners. What happens when we are in this constant, these constant stages of chaos, when we feel overwhelmed continually, where we feel like we can never get on top of what's actually going on? How does that affect us and our business?
Well, I talk about the myth of multitasking and switch tasking. We can dive into that later. But the idea is that if your attention is constantly switching back and forth, it's costing you and it's costing your business. Now, if you're allowing all of these things to swirl around in your head, all of this chaos, that even in the middle of listening to this interview, some of you thought of 3 or 4 things that are undone at your studio, that is incredibly costly in terms of time, in terms of mistakes, and also in terms of your personal stress levels. And again, the business is the entrepreneur's mirror. If you are in chaos, if you are unstable, I can guarantee that the business is going to do the same. If a business owner shows up late for meetings with me, I know that their employees are doing it with them. It always happens like that. It's amazing.
Oh, I love that. And I think that the great thing about that concept as well is it is also then reflected in our parents and our students and our teachers. And so we often talk about the studio owner that's like running around the studio like a crazy person saying, "I'm too busy to talk to anyone. I've got so much to do." And I think that we then see that reflection in our parents and the other people that are part of the business. I guess impact is dependent on the individual, because there is impact in terms of customer impact, the people that it's helping, and then there's impact on the business from a profitability standpoint, fulfillment.
Totally. From brand perspective as well, getting your name out there. But, if I have 2 projects sitting in front of me and they're both high impact, one's going to take me about 6 weeks to complete, I think. One's going to take me 2 weeks. I'll do the 2-week one. Because that thing is at least done, it's out there, and it's working for me in the business. That's the point of building these small little bridges, whether they're big ones or whether they're little ones that are one could be a massive 4-lane highway that we've got coming into our business, and those things are big projects and big goals, and that's fantastic. But if I can just get a walking bridge, done and completed so that it gives some group of people the opportunity to walk in, or maybe me, that project could be completing a new product or a new service. And that's a simple thing for me to do. Get it off my plate. Now it's out there. It's in the marketplace. It's working for me. It's automated, possibly. That's really important.
Now, you've touched on implementation and how important it is, and our members know how much I'm a fan of taking action, doing the right things. A lot of our studio owners have their to-do lists. Every morning they wake up, they've got a lot of things to do, and we hear a lot from our members that they feel overwhelmed more often than not. I mean, what are some of the strategies or maybe some routines, some habits that our studio owners can get into or think about when they're looking at this list that never seems to end?
It starts with mindset, like most things. I literally just got done sending an email off to a business friend of mine who invited me to a great weekend event that it's actually on my list of skills to continuously develop. It's a great kind of speaking type event. Now, I've been a professional speaker for 19 years. I've been paid to speak for 19 years. But because that's one of my core competencies, I'm always looking at ways of trying to refine that. And so I know what I'm really good at. And typically when you know what you're really good at, those who are pros, because I work with pro athletes, we continue to refine that and make it even more lethal. Now, I got done sending an email to that friend of mine saying, I'd love to be able to go to this, and this is right in my wheelhouse of skills I'm trying to continuously hone and develop. But I have some really big projects that I'm working on, and me leaving my business right now for 3 days would really hurt those. The other thing that would hurt is because I could go to it and I could still get all of the work done, but I'm also a dad to 2 little girls, and they need me around as well. So if I went to that event, I would be basically pulling away time from my family because I'd have to work, extra hours in my day, and I'm not willing to do that right now. So what I'm getting to is it's the mindset of you don't have to be saying yes to everything. Opportunity doesn't live inside of a vacuum. Now, there are some opportunities that will show up in your business life that are, those are golden nugget opportunities. Those are golden eggs that, they don't come along, every week type of thing. But then we really do have to weigh those opportunities against some of the things that we're doing. And am I willing to, hustle hard on all the other stuff that I've committed to take this on as well? But you know this too, Clint, that when you're in that constant mode of just taking great action, amazing opportunities just constantly fall in your lap. Like I've got no shortage of great opportunities where my sort of quantity of opportunities, many of those would look like those golden eggs for many others, but I get a ton of golden eggs just constantly flowing my way. And so here's what I know. They're not going to stop because I'm not the person who's going to stop taking good, decisive action. So rule number 1 is learning to say no. Know what your resources are, know what your constraints are in your business right now, and learn to say no. Those new studio owners, there's no shortage of people that are coming up to you constantly, possibly, and giving you all this great business advice on things that you could be, should be, or would be doing if you, did this instead. I had it when I first started out in business. As soon as someone finds out that you're in business, they're like, oh, you should. I have a friend who's also doing this. They think that because you're a business owner, you want to be doing a million different other businesses. And so we need to learn to constrain our focus down on what's important right now. So it's learning to say no. The second thing is starting your tomorrow today. So one of the powerful things that we work with athletes on is constantly developing their imagination skills. And most people think of us as having 5 senses, and really we have 6 senses, and the 6th sense is our imagination. And when we can flex that imaginary muscle and really use it to our advantage, we can start to see incremental and maybe even geometric improvements in our performance. So how can we do that? Well, writing is the doing part of thinking. So I'll say that again. Writing is the doing part of thinking. When we write something down on a piece of paper, we automatically slow down our mental processes so that our mind, when you're writing it down, you're imagining it as you're writing it. So what does that all mean in the context of trying to get us to tackle our to-do lists? Well, you should end your tomorrow today, meaning spend 5 minutes at the end of your day just taking a look at your calendar even. Or before you even take a look at your calendar, thinking about the projects and the goals that you have going on. What do I want my tomorrow to look like? And then you script it out. You write out, and it could be in a calendar, it could be in your journal, it could be in your day planner. I don't really care where it goes. But we've got to master the steering wheel on this car that we're driving. Most people hop in their car as a passenger and just let the world drive it around for them. And then they wonder why they're not getting to where they want to get to. So by doing it the day before, we really allow this amazing imagination part of what makes us a human being work on these things that we have. And then here's the one thing I will say that will eventually become maybe a byproduct or a problem for you is you better keep a notepad and pen by your bed, because when you write this stuff out at the end of your day, it could be the end of your working day or even just before you go to sleep at night. Again, I don't really care what someone does, but the mind starts churning on it. The subconscious starts churning on it. And then you start to get these amazing epiphanies in the middle of your sleep. So you got to keep that notepad and pen by your bed so you can capture it when you do wake up, because you won't remember it in the morning if you don't. So doing that. Don't wait until the morning. Don't wait until the day hits you before you decide, because more often than not, all of your bad habits will creep in. But if you do it the night before, you're like, when I wake up in the morning, I am going to tackle this one thing. Before I even get into the dance studio, I'm going to do that thing. Because I know as soon as I get into the dance studio, all my employees or the customers or whatever the case is, whatever's around you in your environment is going to start to take over. And their demands are going to start creeping into your day. Everyone here is probably familiar with who Winston Churchill is. Winston Churchill had a phenomenal way of managing the prime ministerial office. And what he did was he stayed in bed until 11 a.m. working. He didn't get up. He didn't go into the office. He didn't walk out the door. Breakfast got delivered to him, and he laid in bed and he worked, because he knew that no one was going to barge into his bedroom and bother him. He also knew that the deep thinking, the deep strategy part of governing this country through a very tough time, he wasn't going to get the opportunity to do that smart thinking if he went out, because as soon as he opened that door, there was going to be 5 aides and 6 other people that wanted something from him. So he created an environment where no one was going to bother him. So you dance studio owners that are out there, how could you possibly structure the environment of how you work so that you won't be bombarded with the very real part of being a business owner? And whether that's even spending 30 minutes on the way to the dance studio, stopping into a Starbucks and working out of there, or whether it's working out of home, or showing up 30 minutes earlier than you are right now before anyone even shows up. And that's when you try to get some good quality work done on your business.
I hope you got a huge amount of value from today's episode. Thank you so much for joining us for one of our special best of episodes, where every week for the month of March, we're sharing with you the best guests, the best information, the best tactics and strategies that have been shared on this podcast over the last 2 and a bit years. And I want to remind you, if filling your dance studio is a priority, if you want more numbers, more students inside of your classes, don't forget, jump over to to our website, dancestudioownersassociation.com, to grab your free copy of my guide, 7 Ways to Attract Students in 7 Days. And if you're loving these episodes and you don't want to miss out on the weekly podcast that we do, jump on over to iTunes and hit the subscribe button so that you never miss another episode. Take care, and I'll talk to you really soon.
Thank you for joining us today. For all the resource links from the show and to receive access to our free dance studio growth training, make sure you visit transformmydancestudio.com.